All right, it's 1:30 and we're going to get started. My name is Lisa Berry. I'm a cartographic product engineer on the Living Atlas team.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Bell. I'm also a cartographic product engineer on the Living Atlas team. We actually sit next to each other at work, so it's easy to prepare for.
Yeah, this was nothing new for us.
Yeah, welcome back from lunch. Hopefully you're not too tired. I mean, like we say at work, is it nap time? No, it's map time. So right now it's map time. We're going to show you some smart mapping.
All right, so in this session, we're going to teach you how to use smart mapping in order to explore your data. So first, we'll cover what smart mapping is, where to find it, and how to use it. Then we'll go over some of the rendering options and how you can use each type and use them to explore your data sets. And then we'll kind of end on a fun tips and tricks example where we go through what you just learned in an example. So what is smart mapping? Smart mapping is a tool for setting the cartography in your maps. I use it almost solely in ArcGIS Online, and so that's going to be where most of the examples you see today are from. So what this does is it looks at your data and it immediately recognizes what type of data it is. It also then looks at significant values within your data, and it'll give you smart defaults based on the fact that it has already taken a look at your data. And so that way you get to a better map faster because it's already done some of the hard work for you. So you just select the attribute you want to show, and it starts to offer you appropriate suggestions. And as we're going to be showing in this session today, it's a really cool tool to help explore your data. And what's great about it is that it's very easy to work with, and so that you can make a change, and if you don't like it, you can get rid of it, and you can see all your changes as you're playing around with the settings. And so it's very dynamic, which is cool for the exploration process. And so as you make changes, you'll immediately see them within your maps.
All right, so getting started with smart mapping. Number 4. All right, so I've added this layer to my web map using the add functionality. And to get to smart mapping, you click on the change style icon below the layer name. So you guys might have already used this before and not known that we call it smart mapping. So has anyone ever played with ArcGIS Online in the map viewer and changed the symbology?
Cool.
All right, great, half the room, so this is good. All right, so to get to smart mapping, you select the change style icon. And right now, it's just showing the location of the countries. This is a map that shows major religions around the world. Well, not yet, but it will. And there are lots of ways to visualize your map by selecting the different fields within your layer. And so I can show you, this is the layer, and this is the table behind, the data behind the layer. You've got country name, population, the different religions, and the counts of people within each. So if I select, say, Buddhism, it'll show the percentage of people in that country who follow this religion. And Christianity. And so you get the gist. You explore your data through smart mapping, initial exploration. And there are lots of drawing styles. And smart mapping suggests the best one for you at the top after looking at your data. And also, you can show it through polygons or by proportional symbols, location only, and also categories. And so throughout the talk, we'll go through each of these drawing styles. So I'll show you the basics of smart mapping before we get too deep into it. So if you go into the options for the drawing style, you can normalize your data by total pop or whatever layer you have. You can change the theme, which we'll talk about later. You can change the symbol colors, the outline, the transparency. And you can also play with the interactive slider and look at the histogram of your data. So smart mapping calculates the average of every data set or every field that you select. So the average percentage of people in each country that follow Buddhism is 2%. And notice how the map changes automatically when you play with smart mapping. And there are some functionalities that you can do with no matter what style of smart mapping you choose. You can add transparency, or you can set the visibility range. So this is really great when you have different scales of data. You want to show countries from the world to the country level. You might want to show districts at this scale, and then as you zoom in, you might want to show the finer districts at the street to the room level. That's a great tool to have. At the end of this map, I'll show you what the final map looks like. I'll set the visibility range to show at all scales. And you'll be able to make a map like this by the end of the session, but it shows the predominant religion in each country and the number of people within each religion. Another thing that's really cool with smart mapping is that it recognizes your base map. So notice the color ramps that I have available to me here. It has darker bases and then brighter colors at the top to show high values. If I change my base map to the light gray canvas, then other color ramps are suggested that work better with that base map. So higher values are now the darker colors. All right, go back to Lisa. Oh, one more, yeah, sorry. All right, and the next thing we'll show is letting the data speak for itself. So I just showed polygon data, but you can also show point locations by location only, or creating heat maps, or mapping by counts and amounts. And so I'll show an example of location only. I was working with DC to map the crash fatalities and injuries. These are bicycle, pedestrian, and auto collisions. And we can map location only by the single symbol or with a heat map. So both can be very effective. And after working with the data and using smart mapping, you can create maps that look like this, that shows fatalities over time. Alrighty. Mapping numbers. You want to take it away?
All right. All right, so this is a counties data set from the Living Atlas of the World. How many of you guys have heard of the Living Atlas of the World? Yay, that makes me very happy. So I actually was able to add this into the map by simply saying add Living Atlas, and I searched for 2010 census data, and I immediately just said add to my map. And this was actually also available for states and tracts and block groups, but I'm just going to be working with the county data. But if any of you guys are looking for census data, it's actually just those few clicks to get to this data set that I'm working with right now. And so as Jennifer just was highlighting, smart mapping will give you all these different options based off of what you're looking at. So imagine I want to make a map about just exploring the census data by numbers. So if I'm looking at numeric attributes, so for example, imagine I just want to get a sense for where the housing units inside urban areas are. I'm going to give smart mapping that information, and it's going to say, oh, this is a numeric attribute. And so by default, it's giving me what's called counts and amounts by either size or color. And so I can immediately also change my base map. Jennifer and I are both big fans of the light and dark gray base map because they create a really neutral background for your data set. And so the first thing I'll usually do is change my base map when I'm looking at things. And I also am a big stickler on outlines because I like to draw more attention to the data itself. So one of the tricks that I'll use, that I'll share with you guys, is that I'll add a good amount of transparency to my outlines if I'm using proportional symbols. And immediately the outlines become less dominant in my map and the numbers become more important. And so also, like Jennifer was just showing, you can play around with the sliders to tell different stories. And so in this case, housing units inside urban areas, immediately we are seeing cities appear. But this data is being driven by an outlier. Out here, this 3 million. That's a really big amount of housing units. So with data exploration within smart mapping, what's interesting is sometimes you can just play with this slider in order to get a better sense for that story that you're seeing. So now when I'm seeing housing units inside urban areas, now I'm actually seeing those urban areas pop out a little bit more in my map. And so with smart mapping, if I decide, you know what, I don't really want to show this by size, I can just click cancel and choose counts and amounts color. Now I'm getting a different story. And so what's great about this information is that it does give you this histogram, which is extremely valuable when exploring your data, because it does give you that average value. And so that's just kind of the basics, which Jennifer actually already showed you. So now, let's see here.
All right, so this is the slide about unique symbols and size. So Lisa just showed you showing color and size in your map. So we can also map categories. So in this map, we have different districts as categories. District 1 is in green, or District 7 is in green. We have a district in blue, a district in orange. And this map shows the annual average daily traffic on each road segment. And so the number of cars that go on the road each day is shown by the size of the line, and the district is shown by the color. And to do this, similar to what Lisa showed, you add 2 attributes as your first step. The first attribute is the category, district, and the second attribute is the number, which is the annual average daily traffic. And once you do that, the types and size option is immediately suggested for you. And you can go into types option, and you can change the labels to anything you like. So I could change it to district 1. And then you can change the colors of each line with the color ramp, or by choosing a hex value. And then there are also predefined ramps that you can choose from. And you can also change the size of the line. So if we drag the slider down, notice how the thicker lines get thicker. So it's all a very iterative process, really, until you find the numbers that are most meaningful to you, while also creating a map that makes sense for your viewers. All right, using color and size, mapping them together. Take it away, Lisa.
All right. So we've already started to introduce you to some of these concepts, and so I'm going to show you another example, again using census data, in order to show you how I created the map that you see here. So what this is doing is using, again, color and size. She just showed you types and size. So the width of the line was by a numeric attribute, and the color was from a category. In this case, we're using 2 numeric attributes, and we're exploring those data sets, those 2 attributes, by showing them in the map at the same time. And so what this map is showing us here is an annual compound growth rate for the United States from year 2000 to 2010. My map is symbolized so that everything in blue experienced growth, while everything in red experienced decline. And then the size is giving me a sense for where the population is. So we're seeing cities again appear because of the size attribute that's being used. So I'm going to go ahead and show you exactly how I created this map from the data. So first I started with counties. Went into smart mapping and I said, you know what? I want to know how population has changed in the United States. So by default, it gave me a map that is telling me a story. It's showing me where the most growth is. And what smart mapping does is by default will give you plus or minus 1 standard deviation. So this already is a significant map. This is telling me something interesting. Oh my gosh, have I not been up there? I'm so sorry, you guys didn't say it.
You're at 3?
Yeah, I'm so sorry. Apparently, you can't take me anywhere. My apologies. I'm gonna start over. All right.
You guys were all imagining it.
Yeah,
so
you guys are so patient. Thank you. All right. So I'll start over. In this map, This was the map I meant to be showing you. This is the map that shows everything in blue experienced growth in the United States and everything in red experienced decline by county. The size of the circle is showing population. So we're getting a sense for these areas in California have a lot of population. We see major cities like Phoenix, Dallas, Houston, Chicago, and whether or not those experienced growth or decline. So most of these large circles for large cities with large population experienced growth, but you'll see Chicago and Detroit area have a high population, but they actually are both in red, meaning they experienced a decline in population. So now I'm going to show you how to make this map. So first I start with the county's data. And again, I just go into change style to start the exploration process. I'm going to bring up the annual compound rate. And again, by default, it's showing me something significant. If I go within the options, you can see this 1.6 and this negative 0.7, those are the plus or minus standard deviation. So this is what we're talking about where smart mapping is smart, in that it's immediately giving us a significant map. It's showing us those areas that have low growth and high growth. But I don't think this map is all the way there. I really want to tell a different story with this data. So we can use the themes that Jennifer was talking about in order to use what's called the above and below theme. What this does is specifically uses color ramps that diverge. So everything above a value will be one color, and everything below a value will be a different color. And so if I'm working with population growth, I'm going to go ahead and try this red, white, and blue because we're in the United States. But when we're working with growth and decline, 0 really is that valuable number because 0 means no growth. So everything above or below 0 is where I'm going to find value in this map. So I can simply type in 0 and immediately smart mapping starts telling me what's above and below. It's still giving me those significant values, but for aesthetic purposes, I'm going to go ahead and put it, I want to see where there was plus or minus 1% growth per year in the United States. So this just took me a few clicks to get to this map, and I'm already getting, I think, a better story about the data set. I'm seeing the Midwest had decline. I'm seeing this area over here with decline, and I'm seeing surprising amounts of growth on the West Coast and also in the Appalachian area and Florida. So now, how do I make this into a color and size map? Well, for the first, you'll map color, then map size. So you just add an attribute, and this on the fly will change the map to show with color and size. So I want to get a sense for where the total population is. So I simply make that selection, and my map adjusts. I'm going to go into the options because I'm really not getting the signal I want to get yet. And again, those polygons crept back in. So I'm going to go ahead and just get rid of those so that we can focus on the data. So these small dots are looking a little too small for me. So there's this option to set the size range in any way that I want. So I can go ahead and play with these values until I get the story that I want to be told. So now I'm seeing those smaller circles better, but now I'm not seeing those larger areas of population. So I can go ahead and play around with this until I get to the sense where I'm getting a better map. And again, now I'm still not seeing the cities, so I can bring this down to a value that makes, 4 million. How big are most large cities? Let's just say 2 million. 2 million would be a large city. Now our map is really telling us something interesting. First of all, where are there large amounts of population? And second of all, where's their growth and decline?
It's really interesting. So does anyone have any questions? We can take a little intermission, have a question, conversation
Just
time.
in case we've skipped over anything. Oh, I did have one point that we weren't mentioning earlier, is that the color ramps that are available within smart mapping are colorblind friendly. And many of them also use the Cindy Brewer color ramps. So what's nice about that is that you don't have to be as concerned when you're making a map of, am I going to miss part of my audience because they can't see this pattern? What's nice is that by default, we constructed these, or the team constructed these so that more people will be able to see or actually see and understand your map.
Yeah. And whenever we end up choosing our own colors and not choosing from the color ramp, there's some apps out there that we use, like, what's the one that you use? The color blind apps. And, like the extensions for Chrome. And
Color Oracle. It's a free application that you can add onto your desktop and check every single map for color blindness. So that will also apply if you're working within Pro.
Right, so you select it and then you see on the map what a colorblind person would see.
What did you say the name of that was?
Color Oracle.
Yeah, Color Oracle.
ORACLE.
I'm sorry, I'm taking late because I was enjoying lunch. So
Good, you should.
You're in ArcGIS Online.
Yes.
But I didn't know what smart mapping was. But the other technical question is at your very last slide, you had that vertical bar of the statistics, and I wasn't sure if that covered the range, like from your minimum and maximum values. You were just truncating the really high values. I wasn't quite sure how to read the vertical scale on that.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the question was, what is this vertical ramp showing? It is actually showing this is the max value of your data, and this will be the min value, which is why I was saying that sometimes maps can be outlier driven, which is why we would sometimes want to explore and maybe start playing around with this slider until it maybe means something more valuable towards the actual center of the data rather than being driven by this outlier that's way out here.
Is it truncating all the points above your horizontal bar?
It's making them all the same size. So in a sense, yes.
Sorry, yes.
And then to answer your question, smart mapping, the first question, smart mapping is a way to visualize your data. And it uses smart breakpoints like standard deviations. It uses really nice color ramps and has many different options to visualize based on your fields.
So how do I access that ArcGIS Online?
Yes.
Yeah, so to recap what we showed in the first 10 minutes, to get to smart mapping, first you add in your layer, and to get to smart mapping, it's this little square, circle, triangle called change style, and that will bring you into the interface. And it actually guides you through it by saying, first, choose an attribute, then choose a drawing style. So really, they simplify it into 2 simple steps.
And you can use smart mapping in Pro, which is really nice. Another question?
Comment. You're using Portal, too. You're using the same viewer in Portal.
Oh, yes, it's available in Portal.
ArcGIS Online.
I have Portal
Yes.
as well. That's a great comment.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
I've completely Internet of Living Atlas. Can you do like a 1-minute synopsis?
Yeah, sure.
Absolutely. Let me make sure you can see my screen this time. Okay. So the Living Atlas is a collection of curated data. So as it is, ArcGIS Online has a lot of items called demo, test. And so the Living Atlas it's supposed to help you get into your workflows faster by providing data that's ready to be used within your analytics and your maps. And so what's amazing about that is that it doesn't just cover demographics, which I like to show because that's what I work with in particular. It's actually curated by different categories. You can access imagery, you can access various different base maps, you can access historical maps, you can, again, demographics. There's landscape, so land type, flood risks, terrain. There's also oceans data, earth observations data, urbans, which is what Jennifer works with, transportation, and then also basic boundaries and places. So if you just wanted tract boundaries or census boundaries, you could find those in the boundaries category. And again, you would just be able to access this and add it straight into your map.
So when you say curated, these are publicly available hosted layers on ArcGIS Online. You're not managing them. They could go away at some day.
Yeah, so because it's a living atlas, it's continuously growing. I don't think we have things disappear, hearsay, but yes, there is that possibility because it's dynamic.
Right, they're from sources like NOAA and the Census and the USGS, and they tend to not. Yeah, and then some of them are from some of our users as well, or also from Esri employees. Yeah. Okay, any other questions before we get into arcade expressions and transparency? And okay.
All right, so that's you.
Alrighty. So predominance. These two are really great examples of what a predominance map is. So if you've ever seen an election map, who won, Republicans or Democrats, red or blue? It shows who won between the fields. And then you can also show predominance through proportional symbols. So who won and by how much did they win? And it's not just with election, you can do it with any sort of data. So I'll show you some examples with this demo. So the Brexit occurred last year, and this data set shows the voting area and the number of people who voted to remain in the European Union and those who voted to leave. And so to create a predominance map, you go into Smart Mapping and you select 2 or more attributes. So I chose the remain field and the leave field. And then it automatically calculates who won for each of the voting areas. So I can click on this voting area and learn some information about it. In this case, it's a bright, solid yellow, so that means the people who voted to leave voted a lot more strongly than the people who voted to stay. Whereas if I chose something that was like a dimmer yellow, it was pretty even, or pretty close. And you can also change the labeling with your predominance map and the colors. And to get this effect with the bright yellow, meaning a stronger win, and a dark yellow, meaning a closer tie, you would use the transparency on the predominant percentage. And this is automatically calculated for you when you do a predominance map. And Lisa will later talk about using transparency in your maps. Then I'll show another predominance map. This one is owner, renter, or vacant. So this is available for the whole US. And if you click on this zip code, you can see how many people in this zip code are owning a house, renting a house, or if the houses are vacant. And what's great about this is that you can change your pop-up to match the colors in the map, and you can also manipulate the legend with predominance mapping.
So can you show us how you made that map?
Sure. So I added the 3 fields, just like I did with the other map with remain versus leave for the Brexit map. Those were only 2. For this map, I added 3 fields in my table. Mostly owners, mostly renters, and mostly vacant. And so Smart Mapping suggested this predominant category drawing style. And this is where you change the labeling. There's also a count. So you see how many zip codes in the US have households that are mostly owners, renters, or vacant. All right. This is going to show time.
All right, so with time, there's a lot of different ways to show time in your maps. You can show time over a continuous spectrum if you have date and time fields. You can show via an age, and you can use both size and color to talk about your time data. So I'm going to show you an example, actually this example that you see here. So this map is showing us inspection dates for streets in Minneapolis. So immediately, I can see within this map which ones have been inspected most recently versus a long time ago. So these lighter features are showing us which ones have been inspected more recently, and the dark ones happened a long time ago. So maybe that's where we need to start sending our crews to start inspecting these streets some more. Maybe they have a bunch of potholes. So what's cool about this map is that you immediately get a sense for where to send your focuses. And this map can easily be made. So I'll start from scratch with just roads. Oh, those are really dark roads. Change the background. So we have roads. So how do we get to that time map? Well, again, we can just choose the year, or the inspection date, which is a date time field. Automatically, smart mapping is going to recognize that this is a date time field. And you can see by these little symbols that it knows that these are time attributes. So continuous timeline is what we're seeing here with the legend is showing us dates this is the date of these older features, and these are the dates of the newer features. You can also do this by size. I want to see how old these are. So I'm going to bring this up to the average to get a sense for which ones have a higher and lower. And again, I'm going to bring down my lowest value to get a sense for which streets were inspected the oldest. So these wider streets were done more recently. So then you can also do age. And the cool thing about age is that you can compare it against different fields, a certain particular date, or today's date. To do that, you just go into the options, and it gives you this option. So from inspection date to, for example, let's choose sometime next year. How long next year, when we really need to start relooking at these streets, what will be the age since the last time these have been looked at? And our legend is saying these darker features, they really haven't been looked at in a long time. So by next year, I'm going to want to focus my efforts on these darkest streets. So what's nice about this method is you immediately get a sense for where you need to focus your attention. What's cool about the time is that you can also do time with color and size. So I'm going to go over to Horry County with fire hydrants. Sorry, I clicked the wrong attributes. And so this map is showing us what year these hydrants were built along with the age. And so just like we showed before by just choosing two different attributes, we're getting a sense for what time frame these fire hydrants have been both inspected and when they were built. So immediately, this ramp is showing us that the darkest features are the oldest. So that immediately will tell your audience, okay, I need to know which ones are the oldest. I'm going to look at the darkest. And the age in years from inspection date means that those largest features are the ones that have gone the longest without being inspected. So the dark, large features are going to be where I'm going to want to focus my attention. All right. Oh, I didn't even show you my clever slide. Oh, how time passes.
All right, so arcade expressions. We can use arcade expressions to map data that doesn't exist in the table. So what I mean by that is, have you ever had a data set and you said, oh, I wish this was a percentage and not a count, or I wish this was normalized. So you have to add your field and do the division, and oh, I messed up. I meant to do a rounded value, so I have to re-add the field, recalculate it. So with arcade expressions, which is very new, we can calculate new attributes on the fly. And so I'll show you how to do this.
Oh wait, you want to cover real quick where?
Sure. I'll do it in here. All right, so we'll just go into the demo and I can show you where you can use arcade expressions. This is a map that shows global deforestation. And so countries in red lost forest area, where countries in blue gained in forest area. And this is a great story because from what I knew about deforestation, I just thought we were losing forests all over, but you don't really think about the countries who are actually implementing initiatives to grow their forests. So I really liked this concept, but I couldn't make this map unless I had arcade expressions, or I couldn't have made it this quickly and easily. And so to get to arcade expressions, it's within smart mapping. You see your normal fields that you're used to seeing, but this is a new feature. At the very bottom, you can click on New Expression. And if any one of you have used Excel, to me it's just like that. You know, you want to take an average, so you can use one of the many functions here. So here's the average. and you can insert any of your values or the fields in your data. And if you want to explore, like, I recommend that you explore the functions, and within each function there's a help icon, and the help icon shows what the function is and how to use it. So for average, it says it returns the average of a set of numbers, and you insert values, which is a list or an array of numbers on which to perform the operation. And so I'll go into an example of how to use expressions. So originally I only had the forest area in square kilometers by year, but I wanted to show the difference between 2 years. And so I'm doing the difference between 2015 and 1990, which is the difference in forest area in square kilometers. And this is my when function, so we can search when, and you can look at what that means. Evaluates a series of conditional expressions until one evaluates to true. So when this change, so my change variable is the difference. When the difference is greater than 0, return a string or a text of gain. So now I'm converting text, numeric values to a category. Did it gain in forest area or did it lose? So if change is greater than 0, it gained. When change is less than 0, return a loss. If nothing happened, return null or no value. And so when I do that, when I just do one expression, like Lisa showed earlier, when you just show one, it shows the polygon map. But, I'll cancel and go back in, when I add a second expression, it creates the proportional symbols. And so my second expression shows the absolute value of the difference. So whether it was a negative value or positive, the absolute function is going to make the result, which you can test here, it's always going to be positive. And what's cool about expressions is that you can change your values. These are all test values for the sake of the expression by clicking on the edit button, the little pencil, and you can change the values here. And test it again, and it changes. So this is a really neat functionality. It's really fun to play with. And then it's the same as what we showed before, types and size. So it's still using the same drawing styles, but what's different is that you can change your attributes and map data that doesn't exist in your table. And also having a great pop-up. So Brazil lost just as much as China gained in the past 20 or so years. And this is another example of a map that I created using expressions. It's the most common, it's also a predominance map. So with predominance, you can only, the traditional smart mapping predominance, you can only choose 5 categories, and that's the limit. But I wanted to map more than 5 categories, so you can do that by creating a series of expressions. So the first map I showed you is very simple. This one, you can get really creative with it and create variables for each country, create a list, and then the last statement is, if the total is greater than 0, return that country, or return the field with the greatest value. And so, for example, in New York, most people who claim European ancestry are from Italy. And then in Boston, you have a lot of Irish, a lot of English in Utah, and then Los Angeles is different, mostly Armenians. And so that's an example of using Arcade in a simple map, which is still really powerful, and also a complex map. And then you can also use expressions within your transparency. So, and in your rotation, which I'll show after this. So this is the transparency view that Lisa will show pretty soon. And you can set an expression here, and you can also set it on your rotation by adding an expression at the bottom. And then you can also use expressions in your pop-ups, which I'll show you here. Configure pop-up. And the pop-up is the thing that happens when I click on the country. And the expressions are now added here. This is very new. So you can add a series of attribute expressions for your pop-ups. So when it's a gain, show it in blue. When it's the loss, show it in red. then calculate the percent gain or loss. And then you configure it into here by adding your expressions that you created, which is shown at the bottom of your list now. And this is an example of a map that uses rotation with expressions. So it's showing how much did the sales tax payment change over time. All right, transparency.
All right, so mapping with transparency. Jennifer's already covered a little bit of it with showing how when you make a predominance map, it'll automatically give you the strength of the predominance. You can also use expressions. I'm going to back it up a little bit and cover the basics on transparency. So with transparency, sometimes the data needs to be in the forefront, but sometimes you might want to see what's behind the data. Like if you're mapping Denver, the mountains might be a prominent part of that data set that you're showing. So transparency is really easy to adjust, as Jennifer showed earlier, using that slider. But you can also map using your attributes. So if I have streets by annual average daily traffic, but I want to really highlight the ones with the most traffic, I can put transparency on the ones with less traffic to really start highlighting the values with the most. So I'm going to show how to use transparency to increase clarity of your maps. So for example, this data set is showing us vacant housing units as a percent in the New York area. Immediately, the map is telling me, again, these significant values. So I know nothing about this data set, but I already can see these areas where there's the most vacant housing units appearing in this area. But I want to use smart mapping to continue to explore this pattern and really start to get a stronger map that shows me those areas of the most vacant housing. So within smart mapping, we go to set by attribute value. And I'm just going to go ahead and map that vacant housing unit variable. So if I do that, by default, I'm just getting a sense for where the total housing units are. So this really isn't saying what I want it to. So the nice thing about smart mapping, again, is I can just quickly go in here and keep exploring. You know what? I realized I should be normalizing this. So I'm going to normalize it by total housing units, so that instead I'm again seeing the percent of vacant housing units. So by default, I'm already seeing a little bit more emphasis on these areas that are dark. But I really want my story to pop. So again, with smart mapping, I'm going to go in and keep exploring in here. I can see that it's showing my highest values with 30%, but I want them to be full color. So I'm going to put it at 0 instead. And really, I want color to start appearing earlier, so I can even slide this guy up to the average to get a better sense for anything that's above average. So now when I click OK, wow, now those areas of high vacancy are really popping in the map. And I had no prior knowledge of this data. I just was exploring it within smart mapping and playing around with the different values until it was really highlighting the values that I wanted to be showing. And just like she was, as Jennifer was showing earlier, if I decide, you know what, that's not working out, I can just get rid of it by setting both of these back to none, and my map would be back to how it was before. And maybe instead I just want to add add overall transparency to my map, and that's where I would use this slider.
That's great. So we really want to highlight what matters most to you in the map, the high values in this case.
Yeah, so we're going to move on to a tips and tricks section where we're going to explore this map that we see here and see how we can make it a more valuable map. So Jennifer, give me some of your cartographic expertise on how I can make this map a little bit better.
All right, well, I challenge you guys because you've been here for the past hour listening to these tips and tricks. Can anyone yell out, what's the first thing you would do or one thing that you would do to try to make this map a little bit better? Nice.
All right, so let's go ahead and get rid of some outlines. We can add transparency to our outlines, or if we want to get rid of them completely, you can click this box that says no color, and that will immediately put the focus on the data itself.
That looks nice.
Okay.
Anyone else want to shout out
It's looking
something?
a little better. Anyone else?
What about behind the data?
Yeah,
Maybe
why
change
have I
the-
have so much focus on the Hatteras Plain over here?
What base map is that?
This is the oceans base map. That doesn't seem too appropriate when I'm talking about diversity index. Anyone have a suggestion for a better one? Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and change my base map. There's a lot of different options and because this is using vector tile base maps as the default, we get navigation and streets at night. So we could play around with maybe using the streets at night, which gives us that really bold, dark background. Or we could use, again, like I mentioned earlier, the light gray canvas, which really gives us that subtle background.
My favorite vector tile base map is the human geography base map. That's a new one that our colleague Andy Skinner just created. Do you want to show them how to add that?
So can you walk me through adding that?
Go to Add, browse, or search for a layer, and search from ArcGIS Online for a dark gray human geography base map. There's a light gray version and a dark gray version. And what I really like about this base map, I use it all the time, is it's like a base map sandwich, which is unlike all the other base maps you're used to using. Andy created this map that has a base at the bottom,
Wait,
and then
did I spell gray wrong?
Gray.
Yeah. Oh.
And has a base at the bottom, and the content in the middle, like your sandwich, and then the layer names at the top. And it also has a details layer. So you can add your base as the base map. So click on the base title and use as a base map. And then labels and detail just add normally. And then go back into your content and click on the 3 dots under label and details and set it as your, or move to base map. And then you can set your label as a reference layer. You can also set your details as a reference layer. And what this does is brings it to the very top. And now you can see the details layers, the boundaries and the water bodies. And I would add a transparency to your details to about 50 or 60%. That's what usually looks the best.
Yeah, it's already looking better than it did before. So one more thing that I added an extra in here. One more thing that I'll highlight is that, in my opinion, pink doesn't necessarily tell a really valuable story about diversity. So what's great, again, like I said earlier, these are colorblind friendly ramps. And if I'm thinking about diversity, I really want to know what's above or below average in the United States. So that's where I could use the themes to explore above and below. So you'll automatically see it'll show my map. Everything above average is in purple, everything below average is in red. But again, I'm a stickler and I like my red, white, and blue. So I can change this to red, white, and blue. And so now everything in blue has above average diversity, and everything in red has a little bit below average diversity in the United States.
Looks a lot better.
Yeah.
And then you can show what's coming. So now you guys are seeing, this is a video that Lisa created of what's new, or what's coming, hopefully by the end of this year. And it's clustering. Do you want to tell them about?
Yeah, so imagine you have a large point data set, and it's really cluttered within your map, and you're not really getting much signal when you're seeing all these points. What's coming in roughly, by sometime next year will be the option to cluster your point data sets. And so I know that video already passed by, but I wonder if I can get it to go again. See, first we're starting here with all of these points, and you're going to be able to cluster these data sets, and then you can adjust how many clusters you're seeing, more or less. And that pattern along the equator is really showing up when we're seeing satellites in this case. And you can make it look like there's just a few, or you can really start to see that pattern. That helps because a lot of times points will overlap, and it makes it difficult to see things. So this is a really cool feature that's going to be coming with coming shortly, that you'll be able to make your maps a little bit more clear.
Right, so you have big data, lots of points on the map. With the collision data, we had thousands of points in DC, and you can use clustering to symbolize them, like cluster them together at the zoomed out level. And as you zoom in, the points spread out and you get more detailed. So it's going to be a really great feature.
Yeah. And so when you guys are here, as you guys are here through the rest of the week, there's, I guess that one already passed. At 3:15, rethink how to style your maps in room 16B, and then use smart mapping to unlock patterns in your map. It'll be similar to what we showed today, but you'll see a lot more examples where you're hands-on the data. And really the focus in that one is going to be talking about the data itself, those values, what's important within those data values, and how to really make your data shine. So I would highly recommend those two. And then also at the end of the conference, these slides I believe will be available, and this will have more information about how to use smart mapping. There's a whole blog series and story map series that is an instructional for how to get started with using these different methods we showed today, where it breaks it down to the basics. Which buttons do I click? How do I get started? Why would I use this? The How to Smart Map series really goes into detail on that and really dives in. And then my apologies for putting that session that already passed, but there's also a link to a blog that exists that matches that. It's called 6 Easy Ways to Improve Your Maps. And it's a pretty quick blog that gives tips and tricks, kind of like we showed in that last example, where you'd get rid of put transparency on the outlines, focus on your data values, think about the colors that you're showing, think about your base map, and really let your data tell a story. Because the last thing you want to do is dump your data on the map and hope people get what you're trying to tell them. Because you're the experts. You guys are the subject matter experts that know something about that data. And if you don't, you can use smart mapping to explore it and play with the values to learn more about it.
Yeah, smart mapping really gets you started, but then you finish it off. You take it to the end. So.
Yeah, being the person who knows that important value, because we showed that example where 0 was the middle value or the average, but maybe you have a map where you need to center it around something that like we need to pass this threshold to meet requirements. You'd center your map on that. Mm-hmm. So that kind of gets covered by this blog as well as that session that's going to be later. And then please take our survey on the Esri Events app. Should be at the bottom of this session. Are there any questions? Oh, yes.
We're also doing a session on policy mapping tomorrow, which has a lot of smart mapping in it, and it's about policy-driven maps. How do you find those magic numbers, and how do you create maps that make a difference?
Okay.
You showed one example of the vector tile-based maps. You guys knew the name of it already. Is there an easy way to search for those vector tile-based maps if you know the name already?
That's a really good question. So you want to give an example?
Oh, sure.
Or do you want me to?
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. So another perk of the Living Atlas is that it contains a lot of ready-to-use vector tile-based maps. So if you don't have them set as the default for your map, if you add Living Atlas layers, one of the categories is Esri base maps, and the vectors will be in here. So, for example, we've got the world street map, this is the world night, here's the light gray canvas, and there's a lot of different options in here, and these will be the vector base map version. That human geography map we were showing, Doesn't exist as a layer yet. So in the meantime, yeah, you might write that one down. It's the Human Geography Base Map. It's super effective. There's also a full blog talking about the Human Geography Base Map, if you feel so inclined to go hunt that one down. But when it comes to just the basic vector tile base maps, you can find them within the Living Atlas.
And if you type esriurl.com/vector tiled base maps, it'll take you to this page that shows different. So I created this web map that has all of my favorite vector tile base maps that are custom, like the newspaper, modern antique. If you want to go more simple, dark blue canvas. There's even watercolor, colored pencil. Someone made a Harry Potter base map, Pokemon Go. There's seasonal base maps.
So what was that URL again?
It's esriurl. I'll type it here.
Oh.
esriurl.com/vector tile base maps. And it'll take you to this web map, and you can explore some of the custom ones. There's also vector tile base maps available for the dark gray, the light gray, the traditional raster base maps that you're used to.
Great question.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Tutorials on Arcade.
Ooh, good question.
All right, so there's a whole page on Arcade, and there's even a sandbox. So I think this one's it. And there's also blogs out there about it. Getting started, writing your first expression, and not a sandbox, a playground is what we're calling it. Understanding the language, arcade profiles. So yeah, ArcGIS Arcade. It's at developers.arcgis.com/arcade.
I also believe that there's a handful of blogs within the ArcGIS Online blogs. So, for example, she showed that predominance map that had more than 5 attributes being compared. There's actually a blog that explains exactly how to do that by our coworker Christian. And so within the ArcGIS Online blogs page, you can search for Arcade, and I think he's created
There's
like
blogs
10.
on the Arcade page as well.
They're down there. Never mind.
Yeah.
There they are. And that'll bring you to more of those blogs. Yeah.
So what you showed today is available in Pro.
So Portal is always one behind ArcGIS Online. Oh, Pro, yes.
The smart what you showed you is available in Pro.
Yes.
And then 2 will kind of be in sync.
Yes.
If I do something in ArcGIS Online, I can say, oh, I'm going to try this in Pro.
Right, so you save it in Online, you can open it in Pro and do the same thing in there
Yeah,
too.
it may look the interface may not look exactly like you see it here, but overall the options are relatively the same.
Now with regards to Portal, Portal is always going to be that is a structure in ArcGIS Online. Guys, we really set up a Portal. I'd like to see what we can do there. I mean, without me having to go and mesh buttons. Is there some kind of way I can say, what I'm doing here in Online is not going to work in Portal?
You can do everything in Portal that we showed, except for the newest thing is the expressions in your pop-ups. That'll come in the next release of Portal.
How do I know that
Without looking at the blogs? I'm not sure, probably just looking at the blogs.
The blogs are really a really good wealth of knowledge when it comes to.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
There could be one out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll look.
Yeah, in general, whenever there's a major release, there tends to be what's new blogs that come out, and there will be it for each part of the product, or at least like the major parts of the product. And those will say, this is what's new, this is what's coming. Yeah,
Right.
visual
We love
representation.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So not available in desktop.
No.
No, so we're encouraging everyone to transition to Pro. It's the future of GIS. It is GIS.
Well, this is a compelling reason.
Right. A lot of times, or traditionally, we would work in ArcMap before ArcGIS Online came along, before Pro came along, and we were doing these things intuitively, but it would take a lot longer, like setting the standard deviations and things like that.
Well, sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but even just like that predominance map, when we first started at Esri, which was 3 years ago, I remember we spent 4 weeks writing a Python script to calculate the predominant value.
Right.
And now you can do it in 5 clicks.
So if you're trying to drive for the self-service GIS,
Essentially,
this
yeah.
allows, so if I stay in a portal, big key, little key, I can basically just create some layers and let my human capital figure out the best way to.
Right. The people who know the numbers best can take it from there.
Yeah. Great questions. Anything else out there?
All right.
All right, well, we hope you guys have a great rest of your week, and we hope that you feel a little bit more inspired, and maybe check out some more of the sessions on smart mapping. Those 2 that we mentioned are by our colleague Jim, and he's an amazing speaker. I would recommend checking that one out. So, thank you guys.